Welcome, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's course on Citadel of Faith. Historians of a future age, experiencing the first fruits of world citizenry, will look back with careful scrutiny upon the messages sent to Bahá'ís from the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi, world leader of the Bahá'í faith from 1921 until his passing in 1957. These messages are milestones that record the development and progress of a world religion already beginning to take its place with the historic revealed religions of past dispensations, but yet to be identified as the consummation of their millennial hopes and promises. Standing out amidst the accumulated knowledge of that day will be the overwhelming realization that in the early part of the 20th century, the American nation received a divine mandate to establish, through its moral leadership, universal peace upheld by a world government. This theme is apparent throughout the letters addressed specifically to the American Baha'i community during the decade of 1947 through 1957, entitled Citadel of Faith. It is implicit in the warnings, exhortations, and encouragement given to the Baha'is during that period to sharpen their awareness of the prolonged and increasingly difficult crisis through which their country is passing, and to deepen their sense of responsibility to that divine mandate. For any people in a time of crisis to have an understanding of the exigencies of the time in which they live, to catch a broad vision of and faith in the future towards which they struggle, is to add enormously to the dimension of power and energy with which to carry out their purpose. This is what the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi for 36 years gave to the American Baha'is. From him, they received a sense of urgent, personal commitment in relation to their country and the world. Already engraved within their consciousness was the summons of His Holiness Baha'u'llah to be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age in which they live, to center their deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. Its need, clearly defined in Baha'u'llah's writings from 1852 to 1892, is world unity. The principal requirement to fulfill that need is a regenerated mankind. Citadel of Faith of Baha'u'llah is a term which Shoghi Effendi first applied to the American Baha'i community in 1948, then engaged in enlarging the scope of its activities in Latin America and Europe, as well as strengthening its base within its homeland. This designation was reaffirmed in 1956 in his last but one major message to the community, now deservedly recognized as the citadel of the faith of God and the cradle of the rising institutions of its world order. This was a decade that also witnessed the first half of a prodigious and global teaching crusade, a 10-year plan which again gave the American Baha'is the lion's share of responsibility in planting the banners of their faith in all continents and island groups of the world. Significant to an understanding of the execution of the various stages of what is known to Baha'is as the divine plan for world order is an awareness of the dual nature of events shaping the lives of humanity at large, as delineated by Shoghi Effendi in numerous other works. In the World Order of Baha'u'llah, which projects the early struggling efforts of Baha'is against the landscape of a future golden age of a planetary society, he speaks at length and in detail of the twin processes transforming the planet, reaching into all areas of human life. The first is essentially synergistic, unfolding a system which may well serve as a pattern for that world polity toward which a disordered world is continually advancing. The opposite parallel process is fundamentally disruptive, tearing down with increasing violence all barriers that block humanity's progress toward unity. The sense of imperativeness, of urgent haste, apparent in all of these letters is better understood when it is realized that the forces of integration and regeneration are, in essence, racing with time against those disruptive forces that are swiftly placing the nation and the world in peril. In a message written in 1954, contained in Citadel of Faith, the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi analyzes the roots of the spiritual, moral, social, and political crisis. The steady and alarming deterioration in the standard of morality, he states, is exemplified by the appalling increase in crime, by political corruption in ever-widening and ever higher circles, by the loosening of the sacred ties of marriage, by the inordinate craving for pleasure and diversion, and by the marked and progressive slackening of parental control. Basic to this decline is crass materialism, which lays excessive and ever-increasing emphasis on material well-being, forgetful of those things of the spirit on which alone a sure and stable foundation can be laid for human society. Nor is America alone involved in this cancerous materialism, born originally in Europe, carried to excess in the North American continent, contaminating the Asiatic peoples and nations, spreading its tentacles to Africa. In a further indictment, he warns that America must remedy, while there is yet time, through a revolutionary change in the concept and attitude of the average white American toward his Negro fellow citizen, a situation which, if allowed to drift, will cause the streets of American cities to run with blood. Could America assert her inherent spiritual capability in time to avert the trials and disasters into which she appears to be heading? That America's role of moral leadership would be fulfilled only through tribulation was, at this juncture, Shoghi Effendi wrote, most inevitable and God-sent, though partly avoidable. Its purpose stated in earlier messages was to purge its institutions, purify the hearts of its people, fuse its constituent elements, and weld it into one entity with its sister nations in both hemispheres. Although the road will be long and reverses are in store, it leads to a glorious future. The beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi frequently reminds his readers of the prophetic statements made by His Holiness Abdul Baha, the son of His Holiness Baha'u'llah, and the appointed interpreter of the Baha'i revelation from 1892 to 1921. America had developed powers and capacities greater and more wonderful than other nations. Abdul Baha told American audiences during his public lecture tour in 1912 and was equipped and empowered to accomplish that which will adorn the pages of history, a nation inherently worthy to proclaim the unity of mankind and to unfurl the standard of peace. In one of the most powerful messages contained in this work, written shortly after the conclusion of World War II, the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi draws a clear picture of the parallel forces molding the character of the American nation and its people. The outer, more visible force came sharply into focus when the nation became involved in the First World War, where she redressed the balance and saved mankind the horrors of further devastation of prolonged conflict. Her involvement in the world was extended in World War II when her powers were used to overthrow the exponents of ideologies fundamentally at variance with the universal tenets of the Baha'i faith, principles of unity and justice for all mankind. Other stages along this road were the principles enunciated by Woodrow Wilson, who voiced sentiments more akin to the principles animating the cause of Baha'u'llah than any other world leader. The creation of the League of Nations, from which America unfortunately disassociated itself, and eventually the birth of the United Nations in San Francisco, with its headquarters established in New York City. Simultaneous with this visible march of history has been the rise and development of the Baha'i faith in America, a divine embryonic order within, as both forces propel the nation toward the same glorious destiny. Whatever the setbacks that this idealistic, this spiritually blessed and enviable nation would experience, however severe the storms which may buffet it in the days to come, in either hemisphere, that great republic will, the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi declares, continue to evolve, undivided and undefeatable, until the sum total of its contributions to the birth, the rise and the fruition of that world civilization will have been made and its task discharged. In addition to the major messages contained in Citadel of Faith, many deal with lesser domestic or international issues. Construction activities at the World Center in the Holy Land and the National Center in Wilmette, Illinois. Curtailment of certain budgetary items in favor of more urgent ones. Joyous announcements of stages of progress in teaching plans. A brief cable to rejoice at the departure of the first pioneer to Africa, or to remind the community that time is running short on a vital project. With the exception of some cables expressing personal grief at the passing of many dedicated, distinguished pioneers and promoters of the Baha'i faith, all of the messages are arranged chronologically. They reveal the mind of a man at work whose viewpoint was at one and the same time organismic and molecular. Like a brilliant but beneficent general of an army, he sees the full scope of the battle, but is quick to commend the smallest victory, rejoice over each advance, or to lament the loss of a single stalwart soldier. His final message addressed to the American Baha'is shortly before his passing commends them for their perseverance, loyalty, and dedication to their multitudinous responsibilities in the 10-year plan, then at the halfway mark. He recounts their victories in the development of various institutions both in their homeland and at the World Center, and in the Eastern and Western hemispheres where they have founded assemblies as well as administrative centers and other endowments for these newly emergent groups. The beloved guardian issues a final warning to combat the relentless, all-pervasive materialism, the growth of militant racialism, political corruption, widespread lawlessness, and gross immorality being unleashed within their society. To the Baha'is individually, the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi was, as he signed his letters, their true brother. Collectively, he was the unerring leader of a cause in which they had placed their highest aspirations. To those most discerning observers of a world moving on to its appointed destiny, he exhibited a spiritual statesmanship based upon a new revelation from God, universal and world unifying in scope.